Hi, this is California State Assembly member Rob Bonta, and you're listening to This Filipino American Life.
My secret, just do something that ain't nobody ever done before, but make it sound like something that's always been there forever.
Welcome to This Filipino American Life, a podcast that explores the nuanced experiences of Filipinos in the United States at iba pa. My name is Joe Bernardo, and I'm joined with...
Gerlie Collado! We're here in Stockton!
Yes. Me and my wife, we're here in Stockton, California, the hometown of Gerlie. Stockton is a wonderful city. A wonderful town. It's also the hometown of my guest today. One of our guests is Gayle Romasanta, founder of the publishing company Bridge and Delta, and author of the children's book Beautiful Eyes, and the upcoming children's book about labor leader LeRoid's Journey for Justice. Welcome to the podcast, Gayle.
Thank you for having me.
We also have here, we have some kids here. So don't mind some screaming or little children's noises. It's all good. We also have your community leader and former board member of Stockton Unified School District and executive director of Little Manila Rising, Dillon Delvo.
Hello, Joe, and also babysitter today.
Yes,
because I have no babysitting whatsoever right now.
It's daddy daycare today.
That's right. That's my daughter Colette. So please excuse her. And I just want to correct you, Joe. We are not just in Stockton. We are in South Stockton.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you better watch out.
South side of Stockton.
There's some bomb tacos that I get my tacos at over here
where?
nearby. Right there off of Highway 4, right there next to the bar, right next to the bar.
Luminenza.
Yes.
I always pass by there.
I'm gonna go get some tacos after this.
Dillon Delvo, I have to add that he was responsible for introducing me to my lovely wife, Gerlie.
That's right.
So I don't know whether to thank you or punch you in the face. So
you can thank me.
Thank you. That's the correct response.
So I also have to mention that we actually were scheduled to interview Dawn Mabalon as well. If you don't know Dawn Mabalon, she's a professor at San Francisco State University in the history department. She was a community activist, poet, just leader, both locally here in Stockton and nationally for the Filipino American community. Unfortunately, she passed away a week ago while vacationing in Hawaii, and it's a huge loss for Filipino Americans everywhere. She's really responsible for reclaiming the history of Little Manila and Filipino Americans here in Stockton and California in general. And she was just very important to the community, but especially to you both. So I wanted to first ask the both of you, how did you meet Dawn for the first time?
So I think I saw Dawn at family parties when I was a kid, but I really didn't get to know her until 7th grade. Oh no. Until the 7th grade. We had a science class together at Marshall Middle School, and she was sitting in front of me, and she was in 8th grade actually. So I don't know why she was in a 7th grade science class. I will just say she was not the academic she is now. But she was very annoying. She would always turn around and talk to me and get me in trouble. Little did I know that she would get me in trouble for the rest of my life.
Okay. How about you, Gayle? How did you meet Dawn?
I met Dawn actually when I was reading Sassy magazine, and this was not a physical meeting. I was about 16 and I opened it up, and it was my favorite magazine. I had a subscription, and it had like new wave musicians in there. They talked about Adam Ant and the Rollins Band. And I saw that she was the guest editor-in-chief for that month's magazine. And I was like, oh my God, she's Pinay, she's here, she lives in the same town as I do. Like, I'd never seen this. This was groundbreaking to me. And I met her through that magazine when I was 16, but I met her in person when she was at UCLA and I was at Long Beach State, and there was a poetry reading. And everybody was like, oh my God, Dawn Mabalon's coming. And I was like, Dawn Mabalon, I know that name, I know that girl. And when she rolled up into the poetry reading at Cal State Long Beach, she had an entourage and she had fans everywhere. Everybody was whispering, Dawn's in the house. And I met her that night. But it wasn't until a couple of years later that I moved to San Francisco, and she did too, that we eventually would meet up again at the Black Box Theater Bindlestiff Studio, the only Filipino American theater, I think, in the country, so that we would go there and collaborate.
Right. How about you, Gerlie? When did you meet Dawn?
I think we cross paths every so often. I grew up in Stockton, but I don't think we ever really interacted until I was in high school. And then we talked more when I started to do more like community activities in Stockton, and also because Dillon pulled me into a lot of things as well. And then I think we talked more steadily while I was in school, and I was kind of going through my own process of identity and claiming my stories and my history. And so she really helped to open my eyes to all the contributions of Filipinos here in Stockton, but also across the nation.
So, like Gerlie said, she's such a legacy here. Everybody who has been involved with like kind of Filipino American politics or history, they know the name Dawn Mabalon. What do you think is her legacy to the community, and both to you personally?
For me, oh my gosh, she's contributed so much to me and my family. I think in the grand scale of things is that she made everything accessible. I mean, she was always just Dawn, which is why I think it's so shocking for everybody. She said hi to everybody. She was not in an ivory tower. She was not that kind of academic. She would laugh. She would go to music shows. She would sit and she would talk with you. She would laugh with you. There were so many connections that she made and so many circles that she kept up and actually was part of. So that is, I think, she brought everybody together, and she's bringing them even together now, now that she's passed. For me personally, my background and growing up in Stockton, and when I first immigrated to Stockton, we lived in Little Manila, and I was raised surrounded by manongs, and the family on my mom's side had a farm that was bought by 8 manongs on my mom's side of the family. They all ran away. All the men ran away to the United States, and my mom would come to live on that farm. But in any case, that always troubled me, and it always hurt me so hard just because of the trauma that everyone, growing up like that, there was so much trauma. I always remember there was a lot of drinking. And, when we took my grandfather home and, he was, there's just a lot of trauma, and it always hurt me. And she was one of the only few people that I could see eye to eye and understood exactly how I felt and exactly what that meant. And I remember she would always tell me when we would be talking, like, Gayle, we're the last generation left that has grown up with manongs and knows what it's like, what it's like to, what it's like to get free vegetables and fruit and to know the seasons. I know the seasons, and all the different produce, and what government cheese looks like, all these things that, the shared experiences that we just laughed about. And, she found some documents of my mom, which I know is the same thing as with Dillon and many other people, actually, as I've come to find out. She found documents of my mom working in the Bayanihan house in Little Manila, and she found, our address from, when we lived in Little Manila, and my mom wrote a letter to Cesar Chavez that she found at Wayne State University in the archives in a box that said Stockton on it. And so it just clarified so many things that we didn't know about my mom. And my mom doesn't have a memory anymore. So this was huge for us. We actually, so this is crazy. We did not know my mom was a practicing doctor in the United States.
Oh, wow.
And does that sound insane? We knew she was a stay-at-home mom, and we knew that she might have been a counselor at Planned Parenthood. And so we only know because I saw one of her patients, like, you know, this past year, and we saw them at Red Orchid, right, at the restaurant here in downtown Stockton, the Filipino restaurant, and he was calling my mom Doctora, and I was like, what? And so he told us that she treated my dad, and so my mom was like, oh yeah, and my parents finally like decided to tell us, oh yeah, my mom, you know, your mom was a doctor here. She worked at General, and then she worked at Bainian House, and then she was a doctor at Planned Parenthood. She wasn't a counselor, she was actually a doctor. And so that blew our minds, but we have no proof. My mom has no recollection.
Oh,
it wasn't until Dawn actually found documents of my mom, you know, signing that she was the MD, and, you know, found documents on my mom did we actually have proof, and that we saw the significance of her work. We had not known this. I mean, I am 43. I've only learned all of this last year, and my parents failed to tell me this.
Wow.
So
That's just so interesting how, like, that's
so Dawn,
just
yeah,
information that
it's insane. But
Yeah.
Dawn gave us that history that my mom cannot remember any longer,
Wow.
and so I'm so grateful to her on so many, you know, friendship also, but on so many levels. And I know I'm not the only person that that story belongs to as well, about Dawn.
How about you, Dillon?
It's hard to sum up Dawn, and you know, it's she should have been here with us right now.
I know.
Talking.
Yeah.
This is also kind of new, but I think Dawn was the most decolonized, strong Pinays I've ever met in my life. And I say that because Stockton is a community that literally almost forgot itself.
Yeah.
Literally didn't even know what Little Manila was. Like, when we were growing up, Dawn and I, we didn't really know that there was a place called Little Manila. We didn't know that it was destroyed by the Crosstown Freeway. We all had to leave Stockton, go take ethnic studies. You know, she had to go to UCLA. I went to San Francisco State to learn about our own hometowns. And so when you take that a notch further, not only did we not know about our homes, but we didn't know about our own families as well.
Yeah.
And in that experience and learning about really this precious knowledge, you know, both for Dawn and I, we had to leave Stockton in order to learn about Stockton. She had to go to UCLA. I had to go to San Francisco State. That's where we took ethnic studies classes. We didn't have any of that infrastructure for this precious knowledge in Stockton. And so literally, I think what we were facing in the Filipino community was continued colonization, right? We were in places of power. We didn't have institutions that sought to teach our history or even to do further research in our history. It was a city that destroyed this community. And so what the city said and what the community said was that this community, this Little Manila community, has no value, and that progress means its destruction. And so this, you know, in a city in which, you know, it had the largest population of Filipinos in the world outside of the Philippines from the 1920s to the 1960s, is really kind of 180 from where we should be as a community. And so it really shows the effect of urban redevelopment, and when city and city leaders are straight up racist, right? It left us without our identities. It led us to not even understand to not understand our own families. And I bring this up because that's what Dawn did. Mm-hmm. She was so decolonized because through all the rhetoric of, you know, progress is not towards diversity. Matter of fact, oftentimes diversity in Stockton was seen as a detriment, right? It's the reason for crime. It's the reason why there's all these poor people or why places are ghetto and all that kind of stuff in the city of Stockton. Dawn went completely the other way, and she saw extreme value in our community and our history. And she, more than anyone, right, dedicated so much time and effort to the legitimacy of who we are as a people. And I know the struggle because she, when we first started Little Manila, and she was first starting her book, Little Manila's in the Heart, she faced scrutiny from academics themselves because we were fighting the city. We were getting involved politically. And in the academic world, you're supposed to be coming from like the sterile environment, right? You're not supposed to be like taking sides and all that kind of stuff. But I think you have to have a certain amount of luxury and a certain amount of privilege to kind of come from that angle. If you represent a disenfranchised community, a truly marginalized community, you have to get involved. We don't have that luxury to be sterile in our work, especially when we're trying to save it, right? It was true what Gayle was saying. We were the last generation to have any contact with this first generation of Filipino Americans, the Manongs and the Manangs, right? And she stepped up and she said, they should never be forgotten, and it should be a part of our identity. And so she became the storyteller of our people, the storyteller of kind of our origins in this country, by looking at her family, by looking at Stockton's history, and by sharing it, and then letting people know this is yours as well. This is not just my story, right? And this is just not, Stockton's story, but it's our story as Filipino Americans. And the thing is, as we move into, who we are as Filipino Americans, what does that mean, right? As a colonized people for 400 years, right? We're coming upon a time when we can actually define ourselves and who we are, and we need this precious knowledge in order to inform our futures, right? We understand, there's so many of us, right? We have the largest population of Filipinos in California, of Asians in California, right? We are like the second largest Asian population in America, yet we don't see the same type of representation at the national level or at the state level. We barely got our first state legislator in Romasanta, right? Why is that? If we're like stereotypically the ones that do great in school, then how come we aren't running things? How come we're not all like the CEOs and all that kind of stuff? And I think, especially as we look at the immigration patterns of Filipinos into America, how America kind of continues its colonization of Filipinos is that they only let us into the country if there's a market need. So for example, in the 1920s, they needed field workers. And so for Filipinos to get to America, they needed to become field workers, right? And of course, in the second wave, they needed nurses, right? Because of the Vietnam War, there was a shortage of nurses. And so to get to America in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, you needed to become a nurse, right? We didn't come to America like saying, ooh, I'm gonna bring my bakery or this, right, this restaurant that I had in the old country and I'm gonna open something new. No, to become an American, you had to become what they wanted you to be. And in the end, that is not true freedom. And really we were kind of, I think, approaching new generations in which we can say, no, I don't wanna be a nurse, right? And that's like blasphemous, right? right? But, and I'm fine, I'm cool with nurses, right? I'm cool with nurses, please become a nurse and all that kind of stuff. But when I talk to young people, right? And I ask young people, how many of y'all, like I'll be talking to a group, and how many of y'all want to become a nurse? And like 90% of the hands, go up. Or how many of y'all want, your parents want you to become a nurse? And like 90% of the hands go up, right? And then I ask, well, why do you want to become a nurse? Or why do they want you to become a nurse? And they say, well, it makes really good money, we can make a good living, right? Take care of our families and all that kind of stuff. And my next question to them was, well, so your parents don't want you to become a nurse to heal people, right? And everyone's like, huh? Right? And, something to be said about that, right? Like the purpose of nursing is to heal people, but oftentimes for us, It's really about answering a market need, right? The need for survival in our families. But the purpose of the trade or the career is to heal people, and it's disconcerting because no wonder things are so expensive. No wonder medical costs are out of control, because if you have a bunch of people that are out there just doing it to become nurses or to get money rather than to heal people, well then that's why we have what we have. And so I really think this is about the fight for the soul of our people. And what Dawn does in giving us this history of who we are, where we came from, the challenges that those generations had to face, it gives us context in our own personal lives and the decisions that we make. How are we going to raise our family? What do we need to stand up for? If without that guidance, without that history, who would we be as a people? Right? Are we just going to continue to be a cog to run an economy? Or are we going to bring art into the world? Are we going to bring our full selves, right? And living the dreams that we want to live, right? Or are we just constantly answering a call? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll do whatever you want, sir. Dawn was decolonized, and she was trying to get us to be decolonized too.
So we kind of touched upon it during our conversation, but Stockton holds such a great, prominent place in Filipino American history. You mentioned that most Filipinos in their 1920s and 30s came here as field workers, but why does Stockton hold such a prominent place here in our history?
Yeah, so Stockton is kind of right in the middle of all the crops, right? It's right in the middle of California, but it is near and dear, and it's in the heart, right? Little Manila in the heart, because of the Filipino businesses that open up, right? And so some of the context: it was illegal for Filipinos to marry white people. In the state of California at the time in the 1920s and 30s. It was illegal for them to own property, right? And then also the ratio of Filipino men to women was like 20-1, right? And so just from that sense, the ability to start a family was extremely hard. The vast majority of Pinoys died single bachelors. And so, unlike the Chinese and Japanese who come over as families and now like second, third, fourth, fifth generation American, Filipinos don't really have that experience. And does that make a difference? Yeah, because what if my dad in 1930 bought some property in San Francisco? Right? And what would that mean for generational wealth in America, right? And so these privileges are something that just was not afforded to Filipinos in America, and I think it was specifically done to stifle our people. They had already learned from other past immigrants in how they were welcomed, rejected, and eventually excluded. They just that power is a limited resource or a limited thing in America. And in order for the folks to keep that power, we have to limit those, whether it be immigrants or other people or people that are not like them. And so, we believe that this was definitely done. And so Stockton was significant because because there are these businesses, and because there are these businesses. So there were some Portuguese families that were willing to lease out to Filipinos to open their businesses. The Portuguese people were open to Filipinos because they weren't actually considered white yet, right? That wouldn't happen until later. And so they kind of understood the plight and were willing to lease properties. And so because they were able to lease these properties, it meant that these businesses had addresses. So imagine this, it's 1930, maybe you're about 20 years old, you've left your family behind, you haven't seen your parents, your sister, your brother, your nieces or your nephew, And there's no internet. There's no Facebook. There's no texting. Yes,
There's a world before.
Yeah, and no email, not even real, like, I guess, affordable international calling, right? I would think at the time. And so the only thing you had was writing letters. And if you didn't have a return address, right, how would your family get a hold of you? Well, these businesses in the little Manila neighborhood would allow Filipinos to use their addresses as return addresses. So when we look at many of these addresses that are these letters that are written in the 1930s, 40s, they all have like Lafayette Street, and right, like all in the heart of little Manila. And so, although Filipinos are migrant field workers, they're following the crops, and they really only come to Stockton like from December to April for asparagus season. They consider Stockton home. They consider Stockton Little Manila because come December, it's where they could collect their mail, which meant it was their only connection to their family. And I think, for Filipinos, family equals home. And that's why Little Manila is in the heart. From a very practical sense, it was one of the only places where they could actually have community, right? Remember, the rest of the world at the time, Filipinos were facing extreme racial conditions, right? So Filipinos come, and then the Great Depression hits, right? They come to work the fields of California because no one wants to do that work, right? But then the Great Depression hits, and everyone's losing their jobs except for Filipinos, because people still have to eat, and no one wanted to do those jobs. And then all of a sudden the tides turn, and they see that Filipinos are the only ones working, and the narrative of they're taking our jobs, they're taking our women, begins, and that's why you have a bunch of violence and backlash against Filipinos, specifically to in California and in Stockton. And which would eventually, is that a big deal? Yeah, because it would lead to actual federal legislation, right? 1934 Tidings-McDuffie Act, which would give independence to the Philippines, but also would stop the family reunification programs at the time. It would limit immigration to Filipinos to 50 a year, right? From doors wide open to just 50 a year. Later on, in 1935, the Filipino Repatriation Act would take American funds to give a free ticket ride for Filipinos back to the Philippines, because we were not wanted here, right? Mm-hmm. We were not wanted. Of the hundreds of thousands of Filipinos that were here at the time, only about 2,000 Filipinos took up that offer. The rest of them decided, because basically Tidings-McDuffie made them undocumented overnight. Undocumented overnight. And so they had to exist like that for over 30 years, unless they went into the military, right, during World War II and stuff. So there's major significance. And if we don't know this history, and especially with what's going on in our community or what's going on in the nation today, and where we choose to stand politically, do we stand with those marginalized when we know that our ancestors were extremely marginalized, that we still live in the shadow, right? And the fact that we have to kind of start from scratch. We don't have generational wealth that other communities have had to, gain from. I think, like I said before, this is really a battle for our soul, right? As Filipino Americans. And Dawn gave us context into that. History was not just about the ability to answer trivia questions, but really history is about how do we apply it to today, right? How does it guide us to today? And so that's what she was all about. Yes, we're talking about these things that happened in the past, but what does it mean in the context of our present is probably more important than any trivia question, that needs to be answered.
Gayle, you talked about how your family came here and they lived in the Little Manila area. How did they come here? And what do you remember about the area?
Oh gosh, my family came here. My mom came here, and she did not want to come here. They came here before we did. They came here 1975, I was 21 days old. Her and my dad left because their paperwork was expiring and they had to come. So they had to leave me and my brother and my 2 sisters behind. And so they went and they lived on the farm. The farm was in Brentwood with all the Manongs. And my mom about died because she was in the Manila. She was a doctor in Manila. And then she said if she could have taken a bus from the farm to Manila, she would, because she hated the United States. She does not feel that way now. She's absolutely loves the United States. But at the time, it was so hard for her. And you know, all of these, she said, can you imagine I'm working professional, you know, a woman, and I come here and it's just farmland and everyone's just doing farm work. And so we came about a year and a half later, and my parents were already living in Little Manila, and apparently my mom was working at Little Manila. But I remember my mom had a job, and at the time Little Manila, you know, was still, it still had some stores open. It was still robust. It was the late 70s. I remember they still had the 5 and dime stores downtown. I don't know if you guys remember that. You could, before it closed. Oh gosh, what were they called again? I forgot. It was, anyway, they had the 5 and dime, and they were still called the 5 and dime stores. You can still, I had an uncle who had owned the barbershop down there, Fred Selga. And he was still working at the time. I had still many, many relatives, the old timers in Little Manila, that we would walk to their homes. We lived on top of the liquor store over there. It was a green apartment building, and it still stands there to this day. And it was right there. You could walk down to the church downtown. But
That's St. Mary's, right?
Yeah. Is it St. Mary's?
I think so.
St. Mary's?
I think it's St. Mary's.
But, you know, and there used to be a noodle factory downtown too, that we would go if we ran far enough or rode the bike far enough. But it was definitely, you know, just going downstairs and buying candy at the liquor store, and just going down. And before at the farmer's market, you could still buy like live animals. So we would go there early in the morning, and there'd be turtles, and there'd be chickens, and all kinds of, you know, you guys go to the Ulam Magdalay?
Yeah, well, my mom still continues to go to that farmer's market.
My parents still go to that one, but
So it's actually, it's a farmer's market underneath the
cross down.
Yeah, underneath the freeway. And it was a farmer's market before hipsters went to the farmer's
I want
market.
to say
Exactly.
it's the first farmer's market in the United States.
I want to say that too. I feel like I've read that.
I've read things about it, that's the first farmer's market in the United States, the oldest, one of the oldest ones.
Yeah.
That continues to exist, right?
That is still going on today. Yeah, they sold everything down there. I remember I'd pick at the turtles, and I'd be like, oh, I feel so bad. You can actually get your pets down there if you wanted to. And that's, you know, that was my connection to it. I was politicized early on. My mom would have to explain to me all the situations. At the time, there was, you know, you could see prostitutes at any time of day, you know, walking around, and you know, they were all around. And so my mom would have to explain to me, like, you know, lots of the Manongs didn't have families, or you know, and it was never a judgmental thing. It was never, no, it wasn't good or bad, but she would actually explain to me, oh, see that woman, that's why she looks like that. She'd explain to me that's a prostitute. I don't know any other child who grows up who already knows, like, oh, look, it's a prostitute on Charterway. Or, you know, in the neighborhood. She would have to explain these situations where we would see people who were down and out. And so that was generally, you know, our upbringing. Just knowing that, but, you know, also playing within it, being still oblivious, but also having to explain, like, we would go and we'd see all the Manongs on the weekends, or my uncles or my grandfather, and we'd have the family parties, and, you know, just the different dynamics back then. We'd had a lot of mixed race family members because they couldn't, you know, because there weren't a lot of Panays at the time, you know, in those days. So we have a lot of mixed race family members, Mexican. Also
Yeah, I grew up with a lot of
Hapa.
Mexipinos.
Yes, lots of Mexipinos, lots of Hapa. And that's just the way it was, you know. So that's the kind of Stockton that I remember and that we grew up with.
So when did you hear about the rich history here in Stockton of Filipino Americans.
I did not know I was living in that rich history until I actually went to Long Beach State and I took a class, ethnic studies. It was a Filipino American class about the history with Paul Bagasao. And his sister, actually, Paula Bagasao, I think that's his, Paula Bagasao. Do you guys remember that?
Brad Bagasao?
Yeah, oh yes, Brad Bagasao.
Yes,
It's not
yes,
Paul
yes.
It was Brad Bagasao and Paula Bagasao. Paula Bagasao worked for the Clintons back in the day. But it wasn't until I took the Brad Bagasao class that I know how important, where I came from. No one told us the history. And even though my mom worked at Bayanihan House and my dad...
Sorry, what's Bayanihan House?
So the Bayanihan House was a community center, and maybe Dillon knows a little bit more about it, but it was a community center back in the day in Little Manila. There are some things that happened to it, so it's no longer standing and isn't remembered. There were some controversial things that were happening towards the end there, but I won't go into them right now.
No, that's fine. You don't have to talk about it.
But it was the community center for Little Manila. And apparently they had medical services there. I did not know this. But even when my mom was working there and she was working with the farm workers and treating them, and my dad would sometimes help on their PR campaigns. And this you started telling me, after Dawn showed me the documents and I showed them and my dad explained to me that he would help on their PR campaigns sometimes. He also didn't even know about Larry Itliong. So that shows you how much it's just like a matter of maybe 10 years or so, or not even 10 years, maybe like a matter of 5 years since my parents started working at the Bayanihan House, that Larry Itliong story or the history of the Manongs and the fight, the grape strike, everything was not even talked about anymore, not even featured and not even celebrated at the community center in Stockton. So that it was absolutely just forgotten. And so, my dad, he read the book, and in reading the book and, me telling him about it, he was like, we were never even taught about, or we never even knew about Larry Itliong, or, we knew what was happening and we knew what we had to do for the PR campaigns, but not this history.
So what was it like when you first heard about it, and then you come to Stockton for the first time since you've heard about this history and kind of your history of your hometown? Like, what was it like?
I was proud, but there was always that shame too, because Stockton, one of my friends said it this way, Gayle, I don't know what kind of memories you have about Stockton, because they're all good. Like, I was just happy, I had the best time. But my friend said, Stockton is one of the most violent places I have ever lived in. And I look back and I'm like, oh yeah. I remember growing up, we had to watch television in a back room because there was drive-bys. And then you never knew when a drive-by was going to pop off, or you just don't cross certain streets after 8 p.m. or whatever. And so maybe I, chose to forget or in denial about those kinds of things. But, when I learned that, I did have pride. But when you come back here, the city doesn't have pride.
Right.
So it's really hard when you're talking about, I'm from Stockton, or this is happening in Stockton, or did you know? And when I was in college, I started Kappa Psi Epsilon. It's a Filipino cultural sorority. And so it went from CSU Long Beach, San Francisco State. It's now at UC Davis. It's now at UCLA, at Sac State. I think they're trying to get it at San Jose State now, or is now a CSU East Bay. Is that right? And I started that 22 years ago, and I wanted everyone to know about their history. I wanted, all because of ethnic studies, I wanted everyone to learn about Filipino American history and to really empower themselves, especially the women. I saw that the women were not taking any leadership roles. They were only bringing pancit and lumpias to the parties. They were not being listened to. And I thought, okay, get your piece of the pie. You all need to become leaders. You all need to start running for office. You all need to start running for office at the college so you can get a bigger percent of the budget, right? Because I knew I was in student government at CSU Long Beach, and I was floored to know that the student government got $1 million per year. And this was 22 years ago. It's probably a lot more now. And they allocated that money to different groups. But the Filipino Americans were not strategizing to, when I was there, I didn't feel like they were strategizing or really making the most out of their vocal power and their numbers. And so I started that so that we can begin to understand and learn our history. But when I would come to Stockton, it was such a disconnect. All the Filipinos here, or the people that I talked to, did not know this history. And you know, and that was the beauty about Dawn. She would come and talk here and try to raise awareness for all of this and the difference between, some people who are politicized and then they come back home to Stockton. The difference between her and the rest of us is that she came here and she politicized Stockton. Mm-hmm. I came back here and I wasn't sure how. I was like, oh, this is kind of a too big of a mountain to climb. I don't know about this. And I would politicize, I would do, I went to San Francisco and I learned more political strategy there. And I ended up interning in DC and learning political strategy there. But, with all that knowledge, so I started doing more work in San Francisco. With all of that knowledge, I still felt like coming to Stockton, oh my God, is like a huge mountain to overcome. In 2013 or 2014, University of Connecticut did a study where Stockton was the most illiterate city in the country.
Wow.
And when I moved back here, I was faced with that. And I thought to myself, how in the world am I going to swim in this? And, Dawn swam in it and she navigated it and she organized it and she did it so well, knowing that the statistics and the data were absolutely against her political work, were against her strategies, were against a community in the larger community. I mean, I'm talking the city of Stockton itself, and then even in our own community, that, she's dealing with a people who came here as service workers. They're not going to ask for what they need. They're not going to rock the boat. We are all service workers. We came here to serve the United States. There's no way in hell we're going to organize and to ask for our place at the table. But that's what she did, and that's what she did here, which is huge and monumental when you think about the statistics about the city itself, when you think about the data, you think about when you're looking at Stockton, what supports it is, the largest companies in the businesses here is construction, agriculture, education, and medical services, because they're supporting all the ag and all the and all the construction. So, and that's what you're dealing with. You're not. I think less than 25% have a 4-year degree here. Many of the schools here have over 40% low income, are coming from a low income families. So you are going to teach that history, and you're going to politicize that population. It's easy to politicize San Mateo County. It's easy to politicize San Francisco, but you come here, you're up against statistics and data that tell you it's not going to happen because the people here don't care. And what she did and what Dillon did, what they did together, and really how she mobilized this community in a way that created a passion in people and a pride in people that I had not felt. And maybe, some of the, and part of me not politicizing also here was because it's so painful.
Yeah.
You're dealing with all your baggage, for me at least, you're dealing with your baggage and you're dealing with all your ghosts, you're dealing with your family. And you're dealing with why people feel the way they do. You're dealing with why people are Republicans and hate themselves and hate immigrants. And to me, I had to battle that, but she just fearlessly, just freaking said, whatever baggage I have, whatever trauma I have gone through, whatever, I am going to pull up, I'm going to organize here. And she did, and that is the difference. That is the difference in the kind of woman that she was. Mm-hmm. So I deeply respect that, and that has inspired me completely. Because when you're strategizing and organizing, you also need self-care. You guys probably know that.
Absolutely.
And she was selfless in that. Mm-hmm. I was like, ooh, I need to take care of my family. This is really too hard for me. But she was just like, boom, she was going to go do it. And she did. Mm-hmm. And I hope that with her passing, that we keep that. One woman was able to do that. And so I hope all of us together can continue to do that and ignite that fire in our people. And exactly like Dillon said, to find our soul, to fight our traumas, to fight our biases, to fight our self-hate. The self-hate there and the inability to come to terms with our own emotions about our families and ourselves is huge. And I think that holds us back. And she was able to keep that and work with it and to work within it and to still strategize. So I hope everybody, because she's gone now, we have to work harder. And I hope everybody understands that and comes to terms with who they really are, with their families, with their emotions, with their baggage, and can really find their soul in all of this and fight and ask for a seat at the table exactly like she did, and continue to tell their stories and to uphold Filipino American history as it is and be prideful in it. And not be upset that we're asking for a seat at the table. I've heard that too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right? You've heard people like, why are you doing that? Why are you asking for that? Kind of like, are you crazy?
Yeah. Well, with the book that both you and Dawn have written, it feels like it's going to be a really great conversation starter between like different generations of family members. So I'm really excited that you both chose to go there and really talk about Larry Leong.
Can you talk about that your project with her?
Oh gosh, we were working so fast and so hard on that. This is probably the fastest book, but the best research book ever. It was all from first sources that she got all this material from, and it is her research. It's absolutely her research. If you see the book, you can see at the end, it is her author's note. And so the book is just, the wonderful story of Larry Leong from when he was born to when he passes away. I want to say in 1971 from ALS. And, but it talks about his story, if you look at it, is actually like all of our immigrant story. But Andre Sabayan illustrated it, and if you guys know what Undiscovered SF is, Andre Sabayan is the head illustrator and the designer for everything that Undiscovered does. He's also worked on the mural at San Francisco State. You see lots of his work. Your kids might have worn his t-shirts. He's worked for Disney, for Gymboree, for Target. He's done so much. Just real unassuming artist guy, you know what I mean? He just doesn't want to ever call attention to himself. He just works. He works so hard. So it was just a joy to work on this with them. It's probably the easiest working relationship I've ever had. I wanted to be very respectful of Dawn's knowledge and her research and how she brought it to the table. It was written about 25 plus times. I would say like 30 times. We put it together, and she just kept on going. I think almost my job was to kind of rein her in. She's such a perfectionist where I was like, okay, no more edits. I think that's really good, Dawn. I think you got a whole bag, girl. But she's such a perfectionist, and you guys saw the book, right? I sent you the book, and Dillon's dad is in there. Dillon's dad is on there, and he was a friend of Larry Leong. And we did this all within 24 months.
Wow.
Actually, less than 24 months, I want to say. It started 2 years ago. I sent her an email, and then we called each other. And I was like, hey, girl, I think, we need to write a children's book on Larry Leong. And I was like, do you know there is no history books about Filipino American history for children? She's like, what? I said, Google it. Go look for it. There's absolutely none.
Yeah.
We are the largest Asian American population on the West Coast out of 10 out of the 13 Western states. And we've been here the longest out of any other Asian group. And there are no Filipino American history books for children, like nonfiction. And she was like, no, you're kidding. I'm like, look, I tried to look for it. It's not there. And so from there, we just started working. I remember I was texting her while I was in the hospital. I was about to give birth to the twins, and she was on it. And we've been, she was just so great. She was just like we're always sending and editing and reading. We would have like meetings like past midnight. I remember before we launched our campaign, all three of us were on the phone until 2 or 3 in the morning just trying to get everything ready. I mean, honestly, this has been a very intense relationship that we had because we were working so long and so hard on it. And I don't know how she did it all. And once you read the book and once you see the book, and you can see that it's absolute love and devotion on her part. Everything that she put in there is all her research from Wayne State University, and great care was taken so that it was, Common Core. It was aligned with Common Core, Common Core, the state standards, and also we wanted to make sure that older students and caregivers and parents and families could actually read it and get a larger context. So we had a timeline put in the back. We also had her author's note where she actually painted a more vivid picture, right? Because we couldn't necessarily talk about all that violence all the things that were happening that were really grotesque and hurtful to our community. And that was, so the readership is about 4th through 9th grade, but we wanted to reach even older students, which is why, she painted that picture at the end and the timeline so people can talk and dialogue more in depth about what the realities were of the time.
What was the target, what's the target audience for the book?
We really wanted 4th through 9th grade.
Okay.
We think that it could be 9th grade because of what she put in the back, her author's note and the timeline. But we're really, maybe 4th through 7th. Anyone can read it though. It is fairly, it's about 49 pages. It runs about 52 pages.
Wow.
For the text alone for the story is about 30 pages. About 2 paragraphs each per page, 2 to 3 paragraphs. Just beautifully illustrated though, so it will be an easy read, and we tried to make it interesting. I remember the first drafts there, oh my God, we were just laughing. We're like, oh my God, this is boring. We tried to read it to other kids. I gave it to my daughter, and my daughter was like, oh Mom, this is hard. But one of the funny things is that my daughter actually had she did a little report on this. She took it to school. She came home and she did it in class, and her teacher is Latina, and she's like, oh Mom, we did this report, and I showed the little video that you guys did about Larry Itliong, and I said that he co-founded the UFW. She said my teacher was giving me like side eye and some shade, like, is this true? And it dawned on me that teachers don't know this information. And no one knows this information at all. And that a Latina teacher reading this is probably like, what are you talking about?
Right, because all of what she has heard is that it was Cesar Chavez.
Right, exactly. So, and I was like, oh my God, there has to be professional development on all this, which actually Dillon, Little Manila Rising is doing professional development on ethnic studies, and hopefully, as ethnic studies gains some steam around the state because of some, recent legislation that has been passed, professional development will be the norm. Right now, it isn't absolutely mandatory that that teachers who teach ethnic studies have to have professional development. Some schools will have them teach, and you can't pick the teacher that teaches ethnic studies.
Right.
So you get who you get. So can you imagine somebody who is not politicized, who comes and decides to teach ethnic studies, doesn't know?
Yeah.
And so
there's a lot of work to do with the implementation of it.
Yes. And so even even people who are entrenched in the ethnic studies fight don't know about Larry Itliong.
Yeah.
So this will be a work in progress.
So when does the book come out?
It comes out this fall.
Okay.
We had to make some last minute changes to it. We wanted to say thank you to Dawn in the back. And do it in loving memory. And so it should hopefully come out by late October. There will be a launch for it here in Stockton, in San Francisco, on October 27th at the SF MoMA. And
oh my gosh, you're gonna have to come to LA.
Yes, and I think we're gonna do Los Angeles, and I didn't think I was gonna do it like this, but I'm hoping to go around the different cities with Dawn. To do launches everywhere to kind of teach everybody, listen, this is Larry Itliong. She will be with me in spirit, and maybe if Dillon wants to come along.
Yeah.
I'm serious. I'm not kidding.
I'll channel my inner Dawn.
You know, because I'm not the eloquent one. She was so
You're
good
very
about
eloquent.
that. Thank you. But
You're very-
when you hear her talk,
Oh, yeah, of
though,
course.
she's so good.
Yeah, she's very
Dillon
good.
is very good too, and not having that just to kind of do this,
But this isn't your first children's book. You've done, you did Beautiful Eyes, correct?
Yes,
So,
I did do Beautiful Eyes.
What was that about?
So that is actually, when I talked about self-love here, like in order for us to move forward, we need to get rid of this self-hate and to really come to terms with our trauma, to come to terms with our family trauma, to come to terms with the generational trauma. This book is for, I have beautiful eyes, I have a beautiful nose, I have a beautiful ears, I have a beautiful self. Like, this is a baby book so that we teach our Filipino American selves that we're beautiful. So it's for the caregiver also, if you're reading it to your child, to also say that out loud. So it goes through the body parts, counting, cute little images of, Filipino brown babies, with their family members. So it's really about saying that you're beautiful at a very young age and to know that. And it got picked up by San Francisco Unified School District as curriculum. So the board
Nice.
voted on it a few years ago. Yeah, 5 years ago, I think, or 4 or 5 years ago. And so they teach it at a few of their schools for the K through 2 with the Filipino American students there. But that was, and no one wanted to publish it. I sent it out. And then a small publisher who's Pinay decided to take her chance on it. And she's like, I've never published a children's book, but she decided to. And it grew. I was very surprised by the reception. Everyone was so, they appreciated it. And I was actually very surprised. It took 10 years to find a publisher for it. It was actually written in 2000. Oh. And it came out in 2012.
Wow.
And it was so old. The graphics and everything looked so outdated. It looked like Bed Bath & Beyond from the 90s that Ramona Bad had to redo all the graphics again. But Dawn, man, I love that girl. She, that woman, she actually did all the food for our lunch party at the San Francisco Public Library. She did all of the refreshments, everything. And I have such beautiful pictures of that she had done, and she supported the book.
Nice. So, Dillon, we were talking about how you were politicized, when you went out of Stockton, you took ethnic studies classes. What made you want to come back to Stockton?
Well, that was not the original plan. But getting to live in San Francisco, I kept on asking, like, why don't they have this in Stockton, right? Whether it be kind of the diversity of nonprofits that exists in the community, and just the idea that you could have a career serving the community.
Why don't they have the Golden Gate Bridge in Stockton?
That too. Was something that was just so foreign, right? And to see like the arts and, just access to knowledge and Filipino American teachers, right? Like, just, it was kind of mind-blowing, to grow up with such a large Filipino community, but a community that really kind of lacked access to power, right? In kind of all different types of industries, and in government. And so, every time I would learn something new, I would always think about, what if my friends that I grew up with, what if they had this precious knowledge? Like, how different would the community be? And so kind of one of the first things, I was so mad my freshman year. So this is like in 1991. I took the Psyche and Behavior of Filipinos class with Professor Dan Begonia. It was my very, very first class as a freshman. And I went back to my U.S. history teacher at Edison High School. I was mad. Her name is Sarah Davenport. She was an amazing, beautiful teacher. And I said, how come, why aren't we learning this history? Is it, are you trying to say we're not a part of American history, right? And, she apologized, and she said, I was not aware of this history. It is not a part of our text. It is not required teaching for this, but what she did was she did this kind of like Jedi like educator thing. She offered for me to teach one day a year her class. And one of the things you need to understand is that I extremely afraid of speaking in public back in those days and all that kind of stuff. But I was so pissed, right? I was just so angry that, you know, I had to speak. And so all of a sudden I got to teach a class, and kind of word got around, and then eventually I would do this workshop on the importance of ethnic studies, right? Starting my freshman year at San Francisco State.
Okay, well, I actually remember you doing an assembly at Edison High School.
Yeah, I did a couple of assemblies. Yeah, it's crazy. So, here I was, just probably, it was either like 18, 19, and probably into my 20s when I did that. But I think it was just, I think even early on, I was just, man, we're the only ones that will remember the voices of, the Manangs and the Manongs, right? Mm-hmm. And this idea, this responsibility, like first, the first thought is like, well, someone's got to save this history. Someone's got to get, got to make sure that all this sacrifice, this hard life that they live, that someone put that into context for present day Filipino Americans. I mean, they just can't be forgotten, right? And of course there are groups that are trying to preserve this history and all that kind of stuff, but it never been kind of coupled, specifically locally in Stockton, with kind of politics, right? Like the discussion of why isn't there ethnic studies in Stockton Unified, mm-hmm. right? Why do we have to leave Stockton to learn about Stockton? Mm-hmm. Is that done purposely, right? Is that so people of color will never, get this knowledge and demand a greater stake in their own communities, right? I think, because those who get this knowledge and all that kind of stuff, there's a whole bunch more context to our lives and our actions. I oftentimes I think of, the situation of the Filipino youth in Stockton is similar to, a Mexican youth growing up in a Mexican American youth growing up in America and not knowing who Cesar Chavez is, mm-hmm. right? Like majority of our youth don't know who Larry Itliong is. They don't know that we had a major role to play in one of the largest social justice movements in America's history.
That's insane.
Yeah, right? That's not mm-hmm. a part of who we are as a people. That's crazy. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, you should get angry. Yeah, you got to do something. And so, the funny thing is we all started feeling this all on our own. I mean, when, after high school, I didn't see Dawn, right? And when we both graduated, we just met each other at, the annual Barrio Fiesta. And, she kind of saw the things that we were trying to do. I was working with Filipino youth in teaching their history and all that kind of stuff. And then she was really impressed and she said, we need to work on saving these buildings, right? These mm-hmm. buildings in Little Manila are at stake. And, my first reaction was, yeah, someone should do something about that. But we didn't have anyone else. So, so we had to step up. And I think, that is a similar story, not just in academics or in activism, but really in any industry in America right now, right? Like we need to step up. I mean, if you think about it, right, that movie, Crazy Rich Asians or whatever, yes. It's kind of like, oh, this is going to change Hollywood, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, I know. Yeah. But representation is extremely important. Mm-hmm. And right. I think the narrative for Filipino representation has really been centered around invisibility, right? For the past couple decades. man, I think our youth can contribute greatly to changing that narrative. I think we all can. But I think it means a cultural shift for our people, right? Oh, don't make waves, right? Or, oh, don't bring shame to us, or, don't embarrass us, or whatever it may be. It's about, just bringing it back to Dawn and all that kind of stuff. It's, one of the things I said in this other interview was that she brought us to the table, right? She brought her own chair, sat her butt down at the table, and said, "We're here." Right, and she wasn't just "I'm here."
Yeah, it was we.
Yeah, it's we. We're here. Filipinos are here. Filipino Americans are here, and this is our story. And you better respect us, right? And I think she honed that because she was challenged by the academic community, because of her activism, right? And so because she was challenged, she had to have all her facts straight. Like she did extra studying, she did extra research. She was like just on it, and literally, she had to get to a point where no academic could challenge her, right? No historian could challenge her. She had an answer to everything. She understood that, right? She had to be like the smartest person in the room, because when you're talking about a community that's been on the margins, to the point where it's not even margins, it's just invisible, right? You have to bring it, and she brought that. So it just really underlies the gap that exists in our community. I think we all got what it takes, but I think we have to look at ourselves and find out where the remnants of these generations of colonization still exist, and drive that out of our systems, right? Because she had to confront that. She was down, and Dawn gave us the mirror, right, for us to look at ourselves in. And I think now it's time for us to step up and contribute as she did.
How about you, Gayle? What brought you back here to Stockton after, Long Beach and San Francisco?
Oh gosh, yeah, over a decade, maybe 15 years I was gone. I came back here because it was a great recession, and I got a job at Lodi Unified School District as their grant writer, and I really wanted my kids to know what it felt like to live near the farms. I knew that my daughter was going to grow up in a one-bedroom, in the Bay Area, and I didn't want that for her. I wanted her to know what the seasons were. I wanted her to know what it meant to farm and to eat your own food, and what a real tomato tastes like that you grew, or all the different kinds of produce. I wanted that for her. So I brought everybody. My husband's born and raised in San Francisco. He was like, we would drive here, and then he would see people in trucks with goats in the back, like 4 goats deep, and he'd be like, oh my God, where are we moving? I'd be like, was not even phased. I was like, what is a goat? But, and that's how, we ended up coming here and doing the whole country life, and then moving ultimately into Stockton, and just really feeling the community and living in a Stockton as an adult. I think that's absolutely different than when especially how the times have changed and what it looks like now. And really coming to terms with that as an adult now that you're back, and now that you're seeing everything changing, and even with Michael Tubbs. As mayor. Which is huge.
Yeah.
Which is huge. I'm watching Bill Maher at night, and Michael Tubbs is on television, and I'm like, holy cow.
We're sitting in our LA living room, and I'm like, oh wow, Stockton and Michael Tubbs is on TV.
But it's amazing, and people poo-poo that though. They're angry at him in Stockton. Blows my mind.
Wow.
A certain
percentage, right?
Certain demographic.
A certain demographic are afraid of that change. But it is. I welcome it. I love it. There's
about time.
It is, and then there's the whole Stockton is Beautiful campaign. You know, all these campaigns to find the self-love, the love for Stockton again.
And it can just to add to that was, you know, this is what we tell young people in Stockton is that you know, go off to college. Right now we don't have a CSU Stockton or UC Stockton, and so we get them to college, but we implore them to come back. And the pluses to that, you know, I mean, obviously not all the industries are here, like Silicon Valley is not here yet.
They're coming though. I'll say that.
Yeah, there's migration.
Right. So, but the opportunity to come to Stockton is that you as a young person, if you go to these other big cities and stuff, maybe you can start with an internship, you can work your way up a corporate ladder or government ladder or whatever it may be. But because the standard is so low, no, I'm for real in Stockton, right? Because it's always been these old, very conservative families that have been running stuff, right? Which is why they are trying to stifle like progressive voices and you know, and people of color. You know, we understand this is what exists in the Valley. It's a farmer field worker relationship. And we're at the point where the children of the farm workers, well, they're going to become the farmers now, right? And not just farmers in literal sense, but, you know, people that create things in a community. You know, we tell them, you can come to Stockton and you start running things. Because, you know, some of these folks that have been running things, they're so, you know, they're so backwards and so old, and so, you know, they don't understand like all these new like concepts and all that kind of stuff, whatever it may be.
What's an iPhone?
Yeah. And, you know, like you can run things. I mean, and that's why when I met Michael Tubbs when he was a senior at Stanford, and I 100% got behind him, right? Because he gets it, and got on the city council. Definitely was pushed back from kind of old school people, and now he's the mayor, and he's bringing all this outside funding in. The culture of the city is changing, and really he just represents just one person of a whole generation of young people that can be bringing this change to our community. And so the biggest thing about Stockton is you could come back to Stockton, you can start running shit now. Yeah, seriously.
And you're looking at Gerlie when you said that.
I look at you too.
I love that. It is true. It is true, though. You could be at the center. You know what I'm saying?
So I do have to wrap up, but I wanted to just ask. You said the city's changing for the better. It's getting more progressive, hopefully. What is on the horizon for Little Manila Rising?
So oftentimes, you know, folks want to kind of pigeonhole Little Manila, this organization that Dawn and I started, is just this Filipino thing, right? And although, we are Filipino, we care about preservation of our Filipino American history, and specifically to Little Manila. But what they forget is that in order for us to actually save this history, we had to engage in a community that was destroyed. So destroyed that in the 8 square blocks, when Little Manila was named in a redevelopment zone, there was only actually one Filipino family left in that community. So there were actually, it's a majority African American, Mexican American, Chinese American community. And so when we did community charrettes to envision what they would like to see in their community and fought the city regarding redevelopment, it really became this whole nother thing in how the city has historically marginalized people of color, and you know, I mean, you know, it just continued, with redlining and just, you know, all these different practices, just treated poorly. It's poor, and so Little Manila, our organization, yes, it's about the history, but it's really about how that history informs our present and our future. So, for example, we teach ethnic studies at the high school level. So we started Filipino American history, then we expanded into multicultural ethnic studies. All of those students then got together and advocated for ethnic studies at all high schools in Stockton, and so they actually did that to the school board last year, and now we have ethnic studies in Stockton Unified School District. Today, our organization is providing professional development for all of the ethnic studies teachers in Stockton Unified. We've started a new program called Next America that's working to educate and to organize undocumented youth at Edison High School. And so, you know, why would we have anything to do with that? Well, because our people were undocumented as well, right? Like if we don't stand, I mean, if undocumentation and the immigrant experience is just something that's a part of our history, and not stand with those that are facing the exact same issues that our ancestors faced, well, what does that say about our people? And so, you know, we are definitely getting involved in that. We are bringing this program that actually comes from Paraguay called the Poverty Stoplight. It's too long to explain, but it's basically a program that'll help us kind of identify the ways generational poverty continues in our society today, and to identify those things within families in South Stockton and work towards solutions step by step. So that's what we're doing. We also have arts programs where we teach Filipino, indigenous, and colonial dance, indigenous music, and then hopefully we'll get grant funding to start our own Rondalia group as well. Nice. So we have programs in the arts, education, and of course social justice. And I think all of that is informed by our history. It's about the practical application of history. And I think that's why the humanities are so important, and specifically to empowering a whole community, especially a community of South Stockton, where such inequity has existed. I think that our history has something to say about that, and that we should draw a line and stop that. And so really, that's who we are, and that's how we'll continue Dawn's legacy, right? You know, if you followed her on Facebook, it wasn't just all about Filipino American history. It was her standing up against the Muslim ban, right? The travel ban, right? Against, you know, the breaking up of Mexican families, right, at the border, and you know, all these things that are so distasteful if you fully understand our own history. And the thing is, when you look at that, if you don't have someone calling people out on what is truth, then those that are in power can just lie, you know, bring about fake news and rewrite history. They can literally just say, oh yeah, Filipinos came to America and they became nurses and they were so rich and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I mean, literally, you know, that is what's happening in our society today.
Who does that?
Oh, I don't know. But
rhymes with parump.
But you know, but like I said, I mean, you know, this is a battle for the soul of our people, and really the soul of our nation, right? And the Filipino American story has much to contribute to that as well.
So, just last question: where can folks find you, Gayle?
Bridge and Delta Publishing. You can find us at bridgedelta.com, and you will see our books there. Dawn was supposed to, I'm supposed to work with her on the next 3 books, but we're going to continue on, and we're going to keep on going and making sure we have a Filipino American history book series for students, their caregivers, their families, and the adults in their lives, and you know, even college students. Any age student, they can pick up and find Filipino American history in these books. So you can find us there. And on October 27th, we will be at the SF MoMA in San Francisco. We're doing a book launch. In the fall, we'll be with Little Manila Rising doing the book launch, and at some point in time we will be in Delano as well. Crossing my fingers at Filipino Hall, and in Los Angeles, Seattle, hopefully New York. So we'll be taking the book around on a tour soon for 2018, tail end of 2018 and into 2019.
Great.
How about you?
You can find us on littlemanila.org. Like I said, our organization is about the practical application of history to today's society. As we think about Dawn, the fact that she should have been here right now, and I swear I'm not going to start crying because I've already cried a lot. We are, going to continue fighting. So our dancers, right? We have a arts component, and we had to perform the day after she passed away at Stockton's Barrio Fiesta, and it all hit us extremely hard. And our mindset was, you were built to dance for the ancestors. The only difference is now we have one more, and so we have to keep on dancing, right? We have to keep on dancing, and it's a lie to say that Dawn's passing away doesn't affect us or doesn't leave a huge gap. Of course it does. But we got to keep on dancing. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. We're going to have to fill the gaps in our community. This is something that needs to happen in all cities as we fight for equity in our country. We definitely want to be a part of that. And so if you'd like to support Little Manila and really Dawn's work, we are focused on our youth. We are trying to build a school to social justice pipeline. This is why we talk about the soul, and it's about the context of who we are, that if we understand the background of what came before us, then progress means we build upon that, right? We build upon that. We don't forget it. We don't just dispose of it, but we build upon that, and that's how we have progress. And so Dawn tells a beautiful story of us, who we are as a people. And if you'd like to support that, and its intentional kind of bringing that to today, what does it mean to our people? You can make a donation to Little Manila at littlemanila.org/donate. It's on our website. We're going to continue her work, and hopefully, by the time I'm gone, we'll have something that can continue way past all of us.
This Filipino American Life is produced by Michael Nailat. Our intro and outro music is by Roger Habon, aka 10.4 Raj. Resident reality checker Gerlie Collado, legal advisor Rianne Fajardo, and graphic design by Vincent Collyer.